push that button. All right, now I'm running.
Okay.
This is Brian.
So I'm Brian Scudamore, but my maiden name is Mitchell, and I'm following the footsteps of my great-grandfather, whose name was Walter. And at 23, in 1867, he sailed across in the hope of making his fortune. And he wrote back 14 letters to his mother, his brother, and his sweetheart about his experiences. So we are going to follow in his footsteps and tell people about him and find out more about what America was like in those days. So we're starting in New York, then we're going up to a place that's now called Montour Falls, but was called Havana in those days. So it was very confusing because when I was researching for this trip, I was searching for Havana. Of course, it kept on showing me the Cuba, the island. So in the end, I found out that this is now changed its name. And so he worked there as a carpenter on grist mills and on rail cars and all sorts of things. And then he travelled across and then to Chicago, and then down, and then in the end he spent quite a lot of time in St. Joseph, Missouri, which is as far as you could get on the train in those days. You couldn't get any further in those days. That was as far as you could go. And he set up a thing called the St. George's Society there, which was to help Brits who were in trouble. And he had a horse called Jim, so I know about that. And he wrote back about fashion and about working conditions and about weather and all sorts of things in these letters. I'll show them in a moment. So then he was trying to persuade his sweetheart to come and join him. So he knew about the Homestead Act. So he thought he would be able to get some land thanks to the Homestead Act. But then he discovered to get the grant, he would have to swear allegiance to America. And as he says in one of his letters, he says he'd already sworn allegiance to Queen Victoria, so he couldn't break his promise to her. So he'd have to earn the money. So he was working very hard as a carpenter. But then one of his friends who he travelled over with, a chap called Tom Fife, got very ill with typhoid fever. And so my great-grandfather used up all the money he'd earned to buy the land to pay for Tom's treatment and his lodging and his food. So, but also it becomes quite clear that Emily, his sweetheart, is not that keen on coming to America. So after about 4 years, he comes back, he smokes, well, he's over here in Kansas, he smokes a peace pipe with the Mohawk Indians, and he writes about that experience, about meeting the Indians. And then he travels back, and then he goes to Worcester in Massachusetts, where he becomes superintendent of the horse car railroad company, because it wasn't a railroad then, they had horses dragging the cars rather than being on a steam railway. So he's superintendent there, builds these cars. He says in Fifth Avenue, so I presume it must be Fifth Avenue in New York, and then takes them up to Worcester. But anyway, so then he takes them up to Worcester, and then in the end, in the last letter, he says he's catching a ship called the Nebraska to take him back to London, where he then continues life, which is why I'm British and not American. But I'm inspired by his letters, and they've actually inspired me to create a business that means that to help people tell their life story for their family. So I've created an online system that means anybody, no matter how good or bad at writing they are, can tell their life story for their family. Because I've got these fabulous letters. I know about this man. He's loyal, he's brave, he's hardworking. His son, who is my grandfather, I know nothing about at all, because he didn't write anything down. He only, I knew my grandfather, of course, but I know nothing about his life.
How did the writings come down to you?
The writing.
How do you get a hold of these?
Well, these are handed down from my grandfather, or from my great-grandfather to my grandfather to my father. So this is one of the very first ones.
I'll be very careful. I'll be very careful.
This is 147 years old.
That is amazing.
Darling, turn it round the other way.
Yes, I will, darling.
So that's sent from the first place he went to, which is up in New York State.
1867, Sunday, September the 2nd.
Can you identify yourself?
I'm Paul Scudamore. I'm married to Briar, and accompanying her, I'm the chauffeur on this trip.
She's keeping you well.
She is. But I mean, when you look at the quality of the handwriting, this is
beautiful.
But what he did to save paper, he wrote across this way, and then turned the paper that way, and wrote across this way. in order to get twice as much on a single sheet, because it was expensive to send mail back in those days. And it takes a while to get used to reading it one way and the other.
So these are your transcripts.
And these are the transcripts of the letters. So what I've done. So because of these, so this is what I've done. I've set up this business that means anybody can tell their life story for their family and create a really. This is a sample book, which is us, of their life story. So it's dedicated to my lovely mother. Because everybody's family deserves to know about the history. And
What will your great-grandchildren know about you? Nothing. It would be lovely for them to know what you had for breakfast this morning.
Coming to America and everything else. We all have a story. So that's my grandfather, who is Walter's son.
Isn't she beautiful?
She is.
And he's beautiful. This is your grandmother?
That's my grandmother. Her name is Rosa. Rosa Meir. And I think Meir. But I think she was called Rosa, and I think I'm called Briar, because Briar is like a rose, and it's not spelt the same way, but Briar, B-R-I-A-R, is a form of rose. And unfortunately I can't ask her, it's not possible, but I think that my Cornish name, after an island, but it sounds like a rose. So I think that's a tribute to her, because that's what I now like to think.
So what's the story in being Cornwall?
I'm born in Cornwall. So in Cornwall, there are in England. There's a river called the Tamar, and the Tamar divides England from Cornwall. So we think we are a nation of our own. A bit like the Scots and the Welsh and the Irish, we think we're a nation of our own.
Do you border with Wales?
I'm Welsh, and we're both Celtic.
See, we're Celts.
Like the Bretons, the Irish.
So does that mean that you dance nicely, or what does that mean?
I don't sing well either. I don't sing.
He does lots of things.
Well, you like to talk. I
nicely.
can tell you've got a nice talker.
So that's my grandmother. So I think I'm going to turn into looking just like her.
Can I just?
Very similar.
I think so.
Can I just ruin the whole image bit here?
Listen, we would have been married 40 years.
Congratulations.
Next June.
Suffering.
That's what we look like.
Isn't it?
I mean,
40 years ago.
just get
Let me take a minute with
the
that.
bell bottoms with the turn-ups,
Oh man, you guys are beautiful.
the red hair,
Yes, he had bright red hair when
the
first.
dark beard.
Well, I can see why you picked her.
Well, absolutely.
I'm not sure why you picked him. He looks a little like one of the Beatles or something.
So this is our adventure, and we're trying to find out more about his time in New York.
Yeah.
So he uses an address called at 989 Second Avenue, where he had a Mrs.
he lodged.
Trundy, Trundy, Mrs. Trundy.
Oh,
Was
so
the
wait, so that's
landlady.
right here.
So
Yeah.
very, very close, very close. So we
That's
are
literally right
so
here.
close to where he
We're going
was.
up there tomorrow
Yeah.
to see if Mrs. Trundy is still in.
Very sadly, we went today to go to the New York Museum,
Yeah.
and if I'm going to be absolutely honest, they were really, really rude. I mean, really, really rude. I went with letters to say to them, would they like to see them? Would they be interested?
All of this stuff.
And
Yeah.
because I didn't have a photo ID with me, because we don't have photo
Not allowed to
IDs,
bring anything in.
you can't come. And you can send an email. And I think they could have a good policy. I can understand policies, but they were just rude. So we can't ask them for any information about Mrs. Trundy. But we might go to the library tomorrow and see if there's anything
The
there.
public library is
Yeah.
quite wonderful. If you spend a little time asking, you'll have to take your time because they have protocols that they go through to get you access. But it's, but I think you'll find it. And I mean, my experience has been you have to sort of bring along an extra book to read while they're getting the information for you. But
Can't mind that, I've got
the
books.
card catalogs and of course the access to the card catalogs, you'll be able to discover a lot of stuff.
That would be,
We might spend time there tomorrow.
That would be great.
You have to be patient because it's a big place.
That's fine.
But I think you'll
Just
find
down here, we walked past it.
Yeah.
42nd Street.
Because this afternoon, Brian was worked for the BBC for 25 years. And
Gift of the gab.
I will let you take over the story now.
I made a program called That's Life, which you would have heard. We had 15 to 20 million viewers. It was a consumer program, and I was editor-in-chief of BBC Online. So I was in
BBC
charge.
Online?
I was in charge of the BBC programme. It was one of the most popular programme on the BBC, factual programme on the BBC. So, and then I was editor-in-chief of BBC Online. When the BBC started its website, I ran it. There were 2 editors-in-chief of the BBC. One was the Director General, the other one was me.
Gotcha.
And Director General Mark Thompson is now CEO of New York Times.
So we spent the afternoon.
So you guys have spent some time.
We spent
just
40
spent some
minutes
time
in his boardroom.
Yeah, so I got a photograph of that of him.
And
chatting.
the Times built the new Times.
So
built.
how long were you at BBC for?
25 years.
When did you leave?
I left in 1994. And I then worked for a charity which you may have heard of because you're listening to our environment. It's called the Eden Project. The Eden Project's in Cornwall, and it's the kind of the biggest greenhouses in the world. And it tells a story about how man is dependent on plants, and it's hugely popular in the UK. And so it's going back to my Cornish roots.
I know
I'm interested
all
in the
about
Cornish thing.
that.
Why?
Well, let's start with Wales.
Well, let's start with dolphins.
I'll get a photograph of the place in Cornwall where we live, so you can see.
It's not about me.
No.
This thing's. I get to my.
But there's me and Mark Thompson this afternoon.
Who's the chap in the back?
That's the person who created the New York Times. He started the whole thing.
He started the whole thing.
What's his name? Ox. You don't even know his name. There.
It's a really sweet photo.
Well, it's just a bit of fun.
Solver, Ox Solver.
So where are Cornish pictures?
Don't know.
So it might take me
But
some
move on.
time.
No,
Yeah, it might
move
bore
on.
you still.
Time is precious. Move on.
No, I can do it.
You can email.
I'm going to break here since
Yeah.
we broke.